Happy Friday Eve, everyone. I'm your host, Ellen Wanjiro.
And I'm your co-host, Ro Carter.
I love that intro.
Groovy, baby. Keeping it groovy.
And you are tuned in to Rewind with Ellen, a weekly live streamed series that deep dives into Black film and TV from a female versus male perspective. And there's something special about today's show. We are live streaming from blackfilm.com's Facebook page as well as their YouTube page. So that is very exciting. So tell a friend and tune in every Thursday because this is where we're going to be at. How are you, my friend?
I am amazing. This movie put me in a good spirit, good energy, that love. The whole world is on fire right now, and billionaires are going into space, so it's in a crazy time. So, how are you?
I'm good. I love that we dressed up for the occasion. I feel like this is the type of garb I would have worn in the 60s. Just free-flowing caftans every day if I had it my way. And who are you channeling? What do you have going on right now?
So when we get into the show tonight, Tony Lawrence, he's the one who ran the whole show. Shout out to rest in peace, Don Cornelius.
Right.
I just felt that energy and that vibe. And by the way, I do dress like this sometimes when I go to concerts because I think I have a fantasy that one day they'll tap me on the shoulder and be like, "Hey, brother, you should get up here and perform with us." And I was.
I could see that happening. So we're dedicating the entirety of this episode to Questlove's documentary film and directorial debut, Summer of Soul, or When the Revolution Could Not Be Televised. And so it's about the 1969 Harlem Cultural Music Festival, which took place over the course of 6 weeks at Mount Morris Park, which is now known as Marcus Garvey Park in Harlem. And so what's so crazy about this is that despite having an incredibly large attendance, over 300,000 people came, and heavy hitter performers, the producers of the show, of the film, of the festival, which was filmed, could not sell it because networks wanted nothing to do with the Black show. They were not interested. So it was essentially ignored by mainstream media. And so this footage of this festival sat in the basement of the original producer of the festival until now, which is crazy when you think about it. And so fun fact is Summer of Soul had its world premiere at the 2021 Sundance Film Festival earlier this year, which is when I first watched it. And it won both the Grand Jury Prize and Audience Award. No major surprise there because that's how incredible it is. And so when I first watched it, how did it make me feel? So the documentary is part music film, and it's also a unique portrait of 1969 Harlem, right? So I went into this thinking, I'm going to be entertained. I'm going to watch, the amazing entertainers from back in the day, from the 60s. And that's all it was going to be. But it's so much more than that. Seeing people that look like me and you, Ro, happy and singing and dancing and joyful and peaceful and calm, brought me a lot of joy, right? Because when we think about what was going on in 1969, and we'll talk about that a little later, being able to have a space where you can let go of all your worries and be able to watch entertainers that look like you was incredibly just out of this world. And you see the looks on their faces. You see the energy that's just, rolling off of their bodies. And when you think about, there was a time our ancestors weren't allowed to worship and praise in public. So to see hundreds and thousands of Black people in that space, it was life-changing for me a little bit. How did it make you feel, Ro?
Oh man, tons of emotions. I felt cheated. I felt robbed. Again, a piece of Black history I never knew existed.
Right.
The crazy part is the musicians that performed, they just forgot about it. And so that's crazy to me. I was like thinking about, did I forget about anything I did? Like you know,
Did you forget about it though, or it just wasn't talked about publicly?
Again, I don't know. And I was like, was I there? Oh yeah.
Right.
But you know, to piggyback off you said about the emotions, yeah, I mean, to see a positive image of Black people congregating, you know, like that, of so many people, and no violence, and it was peaceful, right, joyous, and normally you don't see that unless they were going to church, you know. Mm-hmm. And so that was beautiful to see on the big screen, and just to see all the acts, and just, you know, it reminded me of the Apollo, right? You got to perform different. You can perform any other stage, but this one was going to show, hey, doesn't matter where you perform, I don't care how many crowds saw you and gave you applauses, but if you really could show if you're an actor or not. And that's the beauty of that.
Yeah. I can't remember if it was an attendee or an entertainer looking back at the experience that said the following: there's a lot to be said when you're being lifted up by people that look like you. Man, that resonated, right? Going back to what was popping off in 1969, leading up to the festival, life was hard. Life was uncertain. Life was unfair. And so, again, having the opportunity to just kind of escape from that for 6 days, like, right? Like, you know, festivals are usually like a day or a weekend, but a damn near a week. You knew you were going to see such and such every day. You knew the vibe. It's the perfect and beautiful escape. And when you watch the documentary, there are people sitting in trees.
Yeah,
because that's how crowded it was. Like, there was no really standing room that could give you the perfect vantage point. So people were climbing up trees and sitting on branches to watch the stage, to watch the entertainers that, you know, that were there. And I mean, being able to see 19-year-old Stevie Wonder,
woo,
do his thing, like 19, it was impressive. I mean, all right, so before we even get to the music acts.
I thought you were about to go in.
Right, I'm sorry. let's debrief about 1969, right? And everything leading up to that. So let's start with, in 63, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated, right? And also murder of Medgar Evers in Mississippi in 63. Martin Luther King was assassinated in 68. Malcolm X in 65. Robert Kennedy in 68. I mean, there was a lot of political unrest, a lot of civil unrest, and Black people in America were on the precipice of God only knows what, right? So the fact that that festival came into play in 1969, that was almost like saving grace. That was almost like a peace over the unrest. Like, all right, let's take a break. Let's regroup. Let's see some people that look like us. Let's see some new things. And then let's get back to the craziness that's been going on around us. I mean, what are your thoughts about just how that led up into the festival?
Well, yeah, that was one of the talking points in the festival about, you know, how it prevented Black folks from basically burning down the city. And that's how crazy and electric the energy was. And all the people that were trying to change the world, let alone the country, they were all killed.
Right.
So what do? Is hope all gone from there? But I kind of, you know, disappointed because they pacified them with music, right? Did you deal with the situation? You know, I don't know if we're going to talk about it now or later, but, you know, it's actually currently going on right now, right? We had a big summer with COVID and Black Lives Matter movement. And the funniest part is when they talk about, oh, you're going to put a man, because a man went up in space that same summer.
Right.
We just watched 2 billionaires go up into orbit.
Right. Present day.
Yeah, present day. And the same thing, they went up to the brother and he was like, hey, so how do you feel about this? I was like, well, I feel the money could have gone to something better, a little bit more important. And it's crazy. It's 2021 and we're having the same conversation. And so that right there just messed me up. It's just like, really? Now we got 2 billionaires going up, and just money that could be taking care of people and our planet. I mean, that was the big message to me.
Yeah.
In the message, you know, there was one of those underlying tones throughout.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about Man on the Moon versus Black American reality, right? Like, Black folks back then didn't give a hoot about who was going to the moon. Like, we are starving over here. We are oppressed over here. We are dying. No one cares. And you want, you have a camera and a microphone in my face asking me how I feel about the white man going to the moon?
Yeah.
Right? And so I love that the film, like, zeroed into the heart of Black America at that time. So again, it wasn't just a concert, it wasn't just a festival, you know, it was much more than that. It was a life-changing experience, not only for us watching it, but for the people that were there in that moment and what it meant to them. When you think about poverty and oppression, no one cares about going to the moon. And to your point, the parallel lines with now, okay, it's great that now folks can go to the moon for the low price of $3 million, but we're still dealing with, you know, our people getting killed and shot. But okay, moving on. So what stood out to me, there was a lot that stood out, but being able to listen and hear festival attendees look back, right? Because they had attendees, they had luminaries, they had people that were present back then as a part of this documentary. And it was fascinating to watch them reminisce, right? And almost re-experience this festival all over again. They even had some of the entertainers go back. I loved watching Sly and the Family Stone, the two main entertainers. She had tears in her eyes, right? As you watched her, and she had her hands to her face like this, and she had tears in her eyes as she's looking at young her, young them, and what it meant for them to be on that stage and for people to see them. Let's go into the musical acts.
I mean, Stevie killed it.
Oh.
Stevie killed it. I had the pleasure to see Stevie Wonder a couple of years ago at Madison Square Garden. I haven't told a lot of people this, but he made me cry that night. He played Isn't She Lovely, and he brought his little daughter out. This man, let me tell you something, can't see, you know, and the way he played for his daughter and just the love in the room. And this was like during the election time, so the energy in all of America was just crazy. And so when I went to that concert, I mean, whoo, a sigh of relief, and it just came pouring out. And so to see this guy, I mean, people don't understand. The man can't see. I mean, you understand? He was jamming, like the guy had to come and tilt him back. Hey, Stevie, calm down. Stevie was all over.
Yeah, that was incredible.
That energy of the crowd and the people. So you felt that came through my TV, you know, that came through the screen. And that's hard to do, you know, so to feel, I can't even imagine what those people felt like that day. Felt like, hey, we can overcome. Shout out to BB King. My regrets, one of my regrets is not seeing BB King before he passed away. That would have been an amazing sight to see. Sly and the Family Stones, that was deep because that's a little different than the music that we're used to and accustomed to. So you had a couple of bands that were just playing kind of like some hippie vibes, and you're like, whoa. And it was crazy because I looked at the black crowd, I was like, oh, we going for this? Or are we gonna be like, nah, brother, it ain't gonna work here. You know, fight the power, that's what we want. But it worked and it vibed. And so that was their test for them. When they took them to church, Mahalia Jackson taking them to church, she said, hold the mic. And I mean, you felt that. I went to church at night. I went to church at 2:00 in the morning, and I was saved. There was so much energy throughout this. Shout out to Tony Lawrence. I mean, a young brother that I've never heard of till I saw this documentary, and it made me want to Google him more and look to see what he did, because to orchestrate all this, get everybody together, and also get the mayor of New York to say, you know what? I knew you guys were about to burn everything down. This sounds like a good idea. I'm from New York City, ladies and gentlemen. I have never heard of this mayor in my life. It's so crazy. Sorry, I want to make sure I get his name in here.
John Lindsay.
Mayor was a Republican, loved Black and Puerto Ricans, which made up all of New York back then, minus the white folks. And all you hear about when I grew up was Koch, Dinkins because he was the first black, Bloomberg because he did a third term, and then the people's mayor, Giuliani, and that's the only mayors you really heard about. So it was crazy to hear about this, and I wonder why we don't push this positive narrative of a mayor that cared about all of New York, not just one section of New York. And so that kind of that hit me on another level too. It was just beautiful just to see all the different types of black people. You know, you had the big afros, that was the style in, and that was showing us, hey, that was who we were and who we are. And so going back to our culture, our heritage, that was huge to see that. And then you have some of the brothers came out, hey man, you know, I saw the guys come out, I had to change my whole outfit and my suit. And then there's the dashiki movement as well. So there were so many things that I felt in this film, but I felt the biggest feeling for me was I felt proud to be black. And that is one moment no one can ever take that away from me. And it was tough growing up as a kid, like really understanding that, but it's moments like this that make me appreciate it even more. You know, and I guess, you know, being black is something that you're not only born with, but that you earn throughout life. So when people just try to be black, that's why we get upset, because you don't understand. You gotta earn these. You gotta earn these stripes. But I loved it. I had a great time.
I mean, just to piggyback off of what you said, the mayor of New York, that blew my mind. Blue-eyed, blonde-haired, you know, white man, John Lindsay, like you said, never heard of him, liberal Republican, but he switched to the Democratic Party in 1971, right? And that was what, 2-3 years after that festival. But he was pro-black, he was pro-Hispanic, he was pro the right thing, right? The right way to treat other human beings. And that's probably why he was never pushed in the forefront, right? Because he went against what the norm was in the 1960s. But seeing him, I mean, he was called on stage to the festival. Actually, him putting his stamp on the festival is kind of what made it actually even have legs and be alive. But you could see how genuine he was. Right. And that stood out to me just by looking into his eyes and his presence and how he interacted when he went into Black communities. That was deep. That was deep. So I want to correct an error I stated earlier when I mentioned Sly and the Family Stone. I was actually referring to the Fifth Dimension.
Yeah, that's right.
The two leads who were looking back at the footage and got very nostalgic and emotional. So what was dope about all these acts is they were performing their hits at that time, like their #1 hits. For example, Fifth Dimension, Aquarius. It was the biggest record in 1969. So could you imagine seeing like one of the biggest acts on stage and you are front and center and you get to experience that? Who else?
Well, let's go back to that. I was like, they're Black people?
Right. Well, the
original, but they took it over. But I'm saying the flip side.
Yeah, we learned a lot.
I know that performance was gonna go as I was like, ooh, that's gonna be a tough one. That's good, because I saw the crowd. Yeah. But they warmed up and they took it all in, because then it became very psychedelic and very hippie-ish a part of the show. And
hippie-ish, yeah.
I was like, okay, is the crowd gonna? But the crowd was going with the flow, man, and that was beautiful to see on screen.
And that says a lot about how Black America was sort of changing around that time, right? With the music, with what they accepted, with what they listened to. When Sly and the Family Stone first got on stage, the crowd was just kind of like, wait, what's happening here? They're white band members. You got women up front singing in the band. That was not the norm.
On the horn, remember the Black woman?
Yes.
Like, you don't see that. Working the horn. Like,
oh. Right. And so you can imagine being an attendee looking at that and you are perplexed, but you also feel the music, right? And that festival kind of turned it into a radicalized audience, or maybe they were already radicalized, but that sent them over the top in the sense that, you know, being Black was hella cool, right? And so, yeah, that generation had evolved in terms of music. And to your point, psychedelic R&B became the in thing. And when you think about how exciting and how vibrant and how, in your face psychedelic R&B music is, it's almost like this experience that your body has. And it's like half partly church, but also you're having an out of body experience, which I imagine went over beautifully in that time when you needed to have an out of body experience to leave all the shit that you were dealing with to the side and let the music move you and take you somewhere else. Who stood out to me the most was South African artist Hugh Masekela, right? Because he'd come from South Africa, which was knee deep in apartheid, and landed right smack in the middle of the civil rights movement, right? So that was an interesting thing to process. And I can't even imagine what he thought about that, right? Because we understood what was going on in South Africa, but now come to America and it's the same thing. That must have been mind-blowing. And so what was interesting about him is that he kind of brought together the Latinos, Black folks, and then the Africans all in one space. So you have Black Americans in the audience looking at, entertainers who are from Africa and probably thinking like, wow, they nothing different about them. They're the same. They're awesome musicians. They play the horn. Like they are who they are. And so to see the looks on the attendees' faces as Hugh and his band did what they did was everything, because it opened up their eyes to a whole other world, a whole other realm of music. And he, his biggest hit in that era was Grazing in the Grass. And so that's what I like. Every artist that performed their hits at that time.
Yeah.
Right.
So you feel, hey, I'm actually at a show. I'm getting my money's worth. And
it was dope to see not only the perspective of the festival from the attendees, but from the entertainers as well. It was an experience for them too. Like they understood the assignment. They understood why they were there. It wasn't just to put on a show. We are making a statement. We are here to say something, to make a statement. Nina Simone, like, come on.
Woo.
Come on. The First Lady of Soul. Yeah, and so she sang some of her biggest hits, To Be Young, Gifted, and Black. I hoped and thought she would sing Mississippi Goddamn, but
yeah.
Probably not, because she caught a lot of heat for that song, which I think came out in '63. So maybe that's why she didn't perform it, but yeah.
And also shout out to Latin music, Afrocentric music, Ray Barada, and the Mango, Santa Maria, Watermelon Man, like that. That was beautiful, because we kind of forget that, right? I think society today kind of puts us in two separate paths, our Latin culture and our African-American culture. And we both are influences of each other. And so we always forget that. And then you have a movie like this that shows that, and you feel, oh, those are the drums. Oh, those that. And you see that connection, right? Because if you don't have that, especially from Africa as well, you hear all those drums, they kind of sound the same, but they hide from where they're coming from. And so it's all a language, right? We all speak that language, and that's why everybody got the vibe. Some might be a little faster, a little slower temp, but it's all to the same beat. And that was beautiful to see that come together like that. I was like, oh yeah, that's nice. Okay, all right, I'm feeling that, having a good time. My only regret is that I wish they had like after hours, right? Like if you saw what was happening after the show,
right?
Yeah, them. Oh, I can't wait for tomorrow. This is great, or just to see them maybe even hanging out. Like we saw a Night in Miami. Like after the show, like where did they go after that, and what did they feel from that movement? But it was beautifully and well done, really well put together.
And to your point, the way the documentary like cut to after the festival, right? I thought it was such a sharp cut, which fully illustrated that as soon as this festival was done, it was forgotten. It was disregarded. It was disrespected. And so you see the empty park, you see, all the papers and the litter, and it's almost like it never happened. We just didn't spend 6 days having this experience together. And so when you think about what it took to put that festival together, right? There probably wasn't a lot of money, no budget, right? It was a huge undertaking. Let's not forget, Woodstock was the same year, right? All the attention went to Woodstock, a couple of 100 miles away. And so the fact that the producers were able to put this together says a lot, right? And so for it to not be picked up and put on mainstream media is heartbreaking. So which begs the question, what would have happened if it was put on mainstream media? If this was publicized, if it was like on Woodstock status, like what would have happened? How many other artists would have been born? How many lives would have been changed? You know, like the revolution would have been something else. And I think that's what bothers me. If anything bothers me about, you know, the loss of this footage for 50 years, it's that, you know?
That's deep. Yeah, that's deep to see what would that have done to our society as a whole, you know, because Woodstock is up there as one of those concerts. Everybody, regardless of what concert you go to, everybody's trying to get that relive that Woodstock moment. It's impossible to do. You know, even when MTV did like a Woodstock, 90s Woodstock, it's like you'll never still relive that moment. It was such a change for everything in history, how, you know, even how we market things, right?
Mm-hmm.
We did so many things. But oh man, that's definitely interesting to see what that would have done to us, you know, as a whole, as society.
Yeah.
To have us on the same kind of page of respect.
Major game changer. So going back to the perspective of the attendees, I loved that in the documentary, you know, we heard people say, you know, this festival seemed like royalty. Right? You know, people were selling food and drinks. And when we're talking food, we're talking about mac and cheese. We're talking about collard greens, like all that. It's a whole cookout in the outskirts of this festival. And somebody said it smelled like Afro Sheen and chicken.
Hey, that's a good party. I don't care about
accurate.
That's what it smells like in my house right now, everybody.
That's funny.
For the outfit, Afro Sheen, a sprayed, and chicken.
Absolutely. It was the ultimate black barbecue, if you will. And so when you just think about, you know, the people that were in attendance, like as us watching this festival, you just see the swag that existed in 1969, right? The fashion, the hairstyles, like the culture, it was such a vibe at that time. And, you know, it's a vibe we'll never be able to capture again, like that specific feel. And it's so special to watch. And it brings about a sense of pride like no other, to see people like you, people who look like you, in a state of euphoria, in a state of peace, knowing again what was going on around that time. I mean, let's not forget, it was a heavy heroin epidemic in the 60s. Heavy. Black folks were dying left and right. So again, talking about escapism. And, you know, you made a point to say earlier something about pacifying. I mean, I don't know that I would say pacifying, but, you know, we need to do whatever we can do to escape for 2 seconds. Right? To make things okay, to promote hope, to inspire change, to just inspire something other than oppression. So yeah, it's an overwhelming realization, this film footage, and God bless Questlove, because however it found his way to him, when you think about what it took for him and his team to put this together, we're talking 40 hours of footage he had to sit through, right? Obviously, it's you know, this footage has been sitting somewhere for 50 years. It has to be processed. It has to be cleaned. Like, I can't even imagine the work that went into it. And I saw an interview where he talked about he'd called up Spike Lee and Ava, like, hey, Spike, Ava, you know, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, how do I direct this film? Like, what do I do? Like, if there's ever 2 people to call, it's Spike and it's Ava. Like, how dope is that? But I think he quickly realized that what he was sitting on. So to some degree, he had a sense of duty. He felt a sense of duty to put this out.
And you know what I love? I watched a couple of interviews with Questlove, and shout out to Questlove and the Roots. You know, this was a memorial to people that passed. They have a piece of their family that they might have lost. There was a couple of lost pictures of their family members that passed away, and they saw them on the screen when they were kids together, like 20 years old, 19 years old. That's my brother, that's my cousin, that's my uncle. And so this is a piece of history they'll have forever. And that, you know, it sucks. Like you have a fire in your house or something happens, you lose all those memories. It's different now, right? Because you can save it in the cloud. But back then, that's it, man. You had that picture.
That's all you had.
Valuable. And so now to give this back to people was huge, a big moment in time. So I hope we find more and more, you know, things like this that reminds us of how beautiful it was back then. Well, I guess the positive things for us back then.
Right.
That helped us through those tough moments in life.
I couldn't have said it better. Yeah, so if you have not watched this documentary, please do so. It's on Hulu. It's 2 hours, but it's worth every minute because it's conversational, it's music, it's just, again, a sharp portrait of life in 1969 in Harlem. And it was everything. As crazy as it actually was around that time, it's everything. And I think we owe it to ourselves as Black people to be able to look back at our people and see what life was for them, what their experience was. I think it fosters a deeper appreciation for who we are, right? For who the people that came before us are, and what they were going through, right? Like, how else do we continue to teach our children, right? How else do we continue to pass on that message of who we are so that we are not forgotten, right? Because we can't leave it up to other people to keep relevant. It is our job. It is our duty to do that. And so, to piggyback off of what you said, shout out to Questlove, right? For this to be his directorial debut, this is a huge feat. This is incredible.
You know, he has it in him, man. During COVID, shout out to him. You know, everybody's watching D Nice, you know, listening to music. But
right.
Questlove was breaking down music for you on Instagram. And his knowledge, and it's funny, he was talking about, it's like, I didn't believe people when they said this existed. I was like, there's no way. I was like, there's no way this existed. Another person said, I'm asking another person, like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. And then someone finally was like, oh yeah, I was at that concert. I was like, you were? I was like, yeah, it was. And then that moment when he has the guy, he's validating that moment. He's like, I'm not crazy. I actually feel good to know that I actually went to this concert. So the history of music has so many levels to it. And I love when, you know, another decade comes along and I learn something more about music that I thought I already knew. I'm like, oh, learn some more stuff. So I'm very appreciative of this moment. I'm appreciative of this show and that I got to share this moment with you and with everybody watching this, because honestly, it opens your eyes to what could be and what is going to be.
Tell it like it is.
Don't have it.
And it's a testament to how healing music can be.
Yes.
Truly, mentally, physically, and emotionally healing. And that's what it was back then and now as we watched that. So yeah, I'm glad and Ro, we debriefed about this last night, and it was emotional. It was emotional for us then, as it is now. So if you have not watched Summer Soul, please do, and tell a friend about it. Any last words, my friend, before we sign off?
No, always a pleasure. I would recommend watching Summer of Soul in one of these outfits, either her dashiki or kind of you might perform later. Popcorn, maybe a cocktail or two, loosen it up. You know, that's just me though.
No, I think make it an experience. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in to Rewind with Ellen and Ro. And we will see you here next week, same time, same place, Thursday, on Facebook Live and YouTube Live, courtesy of blackfilm.com. Good night, everyone.
See ya.
See ya.